going to cover how we actually are going to be able to help you migrate your test jobs to V2. Some of the steps we've made, some of the changes that can actually help with what you're actually doing, but also some of the steps that need to be taken at the admin level. So briefly I'll start with the admin stuff, and then hopefully we'll spend more time actually looking at what the test job writers actually need to do, and we'll get into some details and some examples, but it'll mainly be discussion at that point. So, V2, yes, it is the end of Lava V1. All the magic, all the problems that were actually part of that, they are going away forever. But this is what V2 is actually delivering to test writers in particular. It gives you a lot more control. The magic has gone away. If things need to be done, they're done explicitly. They're either done in front of you or you need to do them before you submit the job. But Lava tells you what it's doing. It gives you much better information and errors about when things actually go wrong in V2. The lack of magic, making it more explicit, also means you get faster throughput through the job. You don't get surprises, you don't get things going on, but equally you get better control over timeouts when you want to use timeouts, and you get a smoother flow overall. Now, one of the biggest problems with V1 was that many test writers had to rely on using MultiNode to have a virtual machine that did half of the job. That's going away. We've got support for transparent containers. It's been working solidly for quite some time. It's nice and reliable. So you can install stuff as if you were installing on the dispatcher, but they're not, and those packages will go away at the end of the job. So it's a transparent container. The operations are sent from the dispatcher through to the container, and they act on that. And they'll cover that in more detail later on. And as new devices are integrated into various labs, they're going to be increasingly, well, they are now going to be V2 only, and we're going to start to see a lot more existing devices becoming V2 only. And that's going to be the way that the migration is going to be driven to make sure. So you will find that if you try to stay on V1, you'll get to a point where you just cannot submit jobs anymore. You have to have the V2 support. There's a lot of new concepts, a lot of new methods in V2. It is a completely rewritten code base for the dispatcher, and there's quite a few changes on the server that we've actually made as well. That's why it's taken us so long to get it all ready. But we have made a big effort with the documentation. There's always more we can do in the docs, but we have actually made a big change on that. So there's a couple of admin preparations. Obviously, the health checks need to move over to V2. We'll be monitoring V1 test jobs in case there's actually problems that the V1 health check would have shown up, because it's using a different code path. There'll be a bunch of devices that get retired, primarily devices like the KVMs that you're currently using to get around problems of V1 with MultiNode. So things like where you need to put Android tools or things into a VM, it doesn't happen anymore, so those devices will go away. And again, there will be a restriction on submission to V1 devices. That restriction will eventually become absolute, and there will be no further V1 submissions. So this is not just affecting the Harston lab, it's not just affecting production. We've already put steps in place for our own instances like Playground and staging, but it's going to affect the power management instance, it's going to affect the toolchain instance, it's going to LNG are already ahead on this. They're nearly all V2, I think, for their stuff already. So you can ask LNG for help sometimes as well. They may actually be able to help. But everybody here should be on at least the Lava announced mailing list. You should also be on Lava users. If you're in the room, you should be on both of those mailing lists, and you will get a lot more information on that. How are we doing the actual migration? What was needed there was a preview on this screen. I'll do it this way. So once we've got to the point where we are going to turn off your submissions, the way it works is this. We will have a production release, again, announced on Lava Announce. that says this is the one that turns off V1 submissions. At that point, Lava Tool, the submit UI, none of those will accept your V1 JSON jobs anymore. They all just disappear. You get a rejection. You don't get to submit the job at all. Any V1 jobs that are in the queue will carry on running at this point. But the effect of that is that your dashboard, your filters, your image reports, basically, and once those V1 jobs have completed, however badly or well, then you're not going to be able to modify your bundles, your bundle streams, your image reports 2.0 or filters with that release. Okay, so whatever's left to run, it'll populate some data, and that's what you'll have. Now, this migration is massively complex. There's going to be a lot of work for the admin side as well, and there are going to be admin tasks that are independent of the release process. So we've already prepared for this. We know that at least one of these operations is mandatory. And we have written an example, and we've tested the example on a production clone. So we know that at least one of these is going to happen. So you must be listening to the Lava announce if you're running an instance of any kind as to exactly when this is going to work. And we will do our best in the subsequent release to make sure that we check that that particular admin action has been completed before we continue with the installation. But if you don't do it, it does make it difficult if we have to force the installation to halt halfway through. It's much easier, much more straightforward if you do the check first and then do the install. It'll all be covered in the announcement list.
So I just wanted to point out that while in all the instances that we're running in the Cambridge lab, we will delete all the data, and the database will be purged of V1, we will have a clone of that database available for anybody who, for historical reasons, needs to go and look at data going back however long.
Yeah. So
it won't be available in the production instance.
No. So individual labs can decide to have their own read-only archives of, basically it is a snapshot of that instance at the moment that the release was applied that turned off V1 submissions. Now, what that means is that that release will get no further code updates. So it'll need to be read-only, it'll need to be locked down. You may well find that you certainly won't be able to make modifications to it in any way. It'll be a case of the data is there, you can access it, it'll be read-only. Then after that, after we've given time for the admin actions to complete, we will do one big release, and again, it'll be massively announced on the big warnings. This is the one that's going to actually delete your data. And we do mean delete. We do mean actually permanent erasure of your V1 test data. It is going away.
Including all the log files?
We're not sure on the log files at the moment. Production, yes, individual admins are welcome to delete log files for known test jobs, but we're not necessarily going to drive that for all instances. Yes, certainly for at the code level, everything you access under the dashboard menu of any instance will not exist. It's not something that the admins can say, oh, I can give you access to it, and it's not something that can be downloaded, or no matter how much you plead, it is gone. And it's essential we do this because there are some large elements of the V2 design that are completely blocked by the presence of these V1 code objects. And if you delete the code, you have to delete the database objects that are tied directly to that code. So it includes all your yeah.
We'll also reset the job number?
No, not necessarily.
We discussed whether we should reset and start at 1 again, and the answer is probably no, purely because there's a level of confusion about duplicate job numbers and that sort of thing. But we sort of went round and round on this, whether
Yeah.
we should, we shouldn't, and we ultimately said no, we'll carry on as we are, starting at 1.5 million.
Because then you've got the archive for read-only stuff. So yes, all your results, all your attachments, all your metadata, they're going away. Most of the V1 data is actually the test case objects, because you generate dozens or sometimes hundreds and thousands of those per test job. So we are making sure that we can erase that efficiently, and that means quite a harsh just drop the table. We're not going to do anything clever and we're trying to keep your data or not keep someone else's. No, that will take too long. On normal instances, that could take hours, and this is just not going to work. So when? So by next connect is, I think, certainly when you will need to have your test jobs reliable in V2 before next connect.
I should just clarify, we've had a long-held target at the end of this year is V1's gone.
Yeah.
So next connect is September.
So there's two elements to this timeline. The first bit there, the bit the test writers need to care about is the first timeline of when V1 submissions are turned off. That's the one that matters to test writers, because that means that unless you have V2 jobs at that point, you're not using Lava suddenly, all right? So you've got to have V2 test jobs before we make that announcement about when we're going to turn off submissions. That one certainly is going to be before Connect, before next Connect.
So do we have all the devices we need?
As of the 2017 fall release, yes.
You know, X15, FVPs, Junos,
Juno with firmware replacement, Mustang EFI, yes, they are. Juno with firmware updates is already merged into master. Mustang EFI is merging probably this week, and then there'll be Mustang to convert over gradually to EFI after that point. The Mustang EFI one, incidentally, is a flag day operation. It's a case of yesterday they were U-boot, tomorrow they will all be EFI. There was no way back. So that will be a case of, again, listening to the announcements, talking to the lab team, and it'll just be a case of the Mustangs will become V2 only, because V1 can't cope with EFI on Mustang, and your V2 jobs will need to change over to the EFI at the same time. That's just for Mustang.
Did you guys ever consider setting up completely parallel production instance? Because we are super uncomfortable with this current plan.
The answer is yes, we did. The cost was rather high.
In staffing as well as money.
Well, yeah. So the initial plan is that we will run, initially we will run parallel V1, V2 in the lab.
Yep.
Until everybody is submitting V2, and that we've verified that the V2 data is actually giving the results and the value that it needs to, that the V1 data.
And what we can do is, in situations like the Mustang, where there is no way of doing V1 and V2 on the same device, we can use staging.
We can also, we could initially have two Mustangs, which are V2 EFI.
Yep.
So that was considered was too much.
No,
You're already setting yourself up for a lot of feedback if something doesn't work.
But that's why we have playground and staging, is to make sure that we can test these things ahead of time. And also, that's why we're offering staging as a test bed for people who are writing V2 test definitions. Because as I'll cover later in the slides, there are changes you need, not just to your, well, obviously you're changing the actual job submission massively, but you also need to make changes to your test definition files as well. The lab
so
test
I have
does
exactly
things.
the same concerns you do,
Yeah.
and I'm making sure, not trying, I'm making sure that we mitigate
Yeah.
for everything. So my concern, I've voiced this before, so it's not new information, is that we suddenly switch over on production and there's a major, oh, we forgot that.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing a lot on staging to begin with. We have a migration plan, where we run V1, V2, wherever possible, side by side, so that we will have CI submissions,
Yep.
which are submitting the same job, but one of them is V1, one of them is V2, and we can verify that everything is running according to the way it should, and that the data we're getting out is useful in V2. And we run that for a minimum of a month.
Yeah. So
I stress that as a minimum, because we don't know what we'll find out during that month.
Yeah. And as one of the slide updates here, as it is on the slide there, we also have agreed at a previous Connect in Vegas that teams will have 3 months of V2 data before we get to the point where we even turn off V1 submissions.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Because I thought when you switch production, there's no more V1 data.
No, that comes after.
2 stages. First is to stop.
No, that comes after. Once we've gone through, we've got 3 months of useful V2 data, then that's the point at which we go, okay, V1 can now go away.
Yeah. And the first stage of that is to turn off submissions. Only later do we actually start deleting objects. It's a separate stage entirely. Okay? And again, you'll see on every slide, it's a case of follow the announcements. You really must be on that list. That's where we actually do all this sort of stuff. So we have made big strides in the documentation. Documentation can always be expanded, and we need your input to tell us what is missing in the documentation. What can't you find? All right? Because in most cases, the information you want is there, but we may well need to improve the index, improve the contents to help you find it. But do use the index and the contents in the glossary, because it's a very useful way of finding a way through the documentation, because it's getting to be quite a large amount of docs. So not just Lava announced, but Lava users. This is a very big migration step we're making. There's going to be a lot of people from not just within Linaro, but also many, many community users as well, who are going to be popping up on IRC screaming that, I don't know how this works, I don't know how to do that. IRC could get very, very, very busy, and it's very difficult on IRC to follow detailed conversations when you've got many other conversations going on in parallel. So don't jump to IRC as a default. Think about the mailing list and use the mailing list, because it's a lot easier to use email, because then you can just attach the log files, attach the job submission, attach this and attach that. You don't have to use the paste bins you use in IRC. The Lava software team have done all the heavy lifting for V2 to get the code ready and to get it there. We know there's going to be corner cases, and we know there's likely to be bugs. But the point is that the software team are now got a lot more time to actually help people with the test definitions, with the test writer problems, with bugs. Because the big work is complete. We're not being distracted by having to do large amounts of that. So talk to the software team, and not just me and Dave, but you've got the rest of the guys there. It's common to find that people sort of keep on tagging the same person. There's a lot of people in the team, there's a lot of people who can help, and that's in particular why the list is a lot better, because you will get better responses from a variety of people. And don't leave all your V2 development work for your release week. Do it between release weeks, please, because then we got a chance of actually getting bug fixes to you before you actually make a release week. So think ahead. This is why we're putting a big session here. So why we're publicizing this so much. Test writers need to think ahead about what's going on. Right. So how does it affect test writers? We are making sure that staging is there for test writers to develop their tests on. We can give you access to submit to staging. We can do all that kind of stuff. Staging updates automatically. The software team will be watching it all the time, making sure that there's no actual problems with the master branch. The other part, so you can use that to actually do your test definition changes. The other thing you need to think about is, particularly with the Android use cases, particularly if you're using any kind of multi-node to work around problems with V1, you need to think about what you're doing with your results and how you're reporting your results, because there's a habit in V1 of, oh, I'll just write these files to this special directory that the Lava test helpers know about, and at the end of the job, Lava will go around in V1 mode and bundle them all up and send them all back. Doesn't happen with V2 anymore, mainly because there's too many cases where the test falls over before it gets to that endpoint, and you never get a bundle at all. So V2 reports results immediately that you actually call Lava test case. But that might, to get the benefit of that, you need to do that in your actual test scripts themselves. So it's easy to check for Lava test case in the path inside your test shell. And if you find Lava test case, you use it. Otherwise, you can echo, or you can print, or you can do logging, or whatever else your script wants to do. But that's making your script portable, because then you can actually run your script inside and outside Lava without any problems. You just get an echo instead of where you would call Lava test case. So multinode is still there. It's not gone away. You still use multinode with V2 when you need to, but you don't need to use it for the problematic use cases of V1. And the other part to it is to make sure that you therefore remove calls to Lava wait, Lava sync, that sort of thing, when you're porting a V1 job that used a VM just because it was V1. So those will need to move over. When you're porting those and you're thinking, oh, I need to make this a portable script to run on my own machine, think about just echoing to the user, because when you're running these on your own machine, you're not doing it, you're doing it interactively. So you can just put up a prompt saying, now you need to do this, or now you need to wait until that bit is finished before moving on to the next bit. You just sit there with a prompt in your own test scripts.
I'll just make the comment that Milos has been using V2 quite a lot.
He has, yeah.
Testing, and so porting his test cases over to V2. And he has said very positive things. It's like when we say, oh, we're going to do this on this new device, and he goes, V2 only, I don't want V1 anymore. So it is a huge step forward. It makes a huge difference to the way Lava runs. It's much more efficient. Yeah.
And the entire QA team are behind this part about making your test shell scripts portable. It's what the QA team wants to happen, is that you will have the ability to run your test scripts with a device attached to your laptop in exactly the same way as it would under Lava. And the best way to do that is make your test scripts portable, to make less reliance on the Lava test shell helpers. And the QA team will help with that, and the Lava software team will help with that as well. And then the other little change you need to think about is what I mentioned at the start about bundles and attachments and this kind of thing. It's a case of there is no bundle. If you want to use attachments, there is a publishing API which is documented. That's for large files. You just push them to temporary storage. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. It's nice and flexible. Again, V2 gives you the control to do what you need to do. It doesn't get in the way, doesn't use magic. It's all explicit, and it does only what it tells you to do. And incidentally on that, with V1, the whole magic of deploy, boot, test, and then suddenly be in another boot before test. No. You put deploy, boot, test, you will get one boot and one test. You deploy, you miss out a step, you won't get that step. If your test doesn't work, that's your problem. But V2 will tell you what it's doing. So specifically with Android, you're moving from a VM to a container. That can have some issues and some things you need to work in within your scripts. Again, you don't want to be doing any kind of synchronization because it's actually synchronous already.
You should just point out that the container is not another new device type.
No.
Lava V2 does that for you.
It is a transparent container made for you with parameters you specify in the job. So you can specify which OS, which suite, and which mirrors it actually uses for that container. And you can also add packages to be installed in that container at the very start. There will be some, when you look at the example V2 jobs, there will always be some packages specified just to get the device actually running and get the device operating, but you can add to that list. And again, we are doing we're doing work on staging to run these kinds of test jobs ourselves. So we have got example CTS jobs on Hikey. We've got examples on Juno of running Android with an LXC on Juno. So there are starting points for you to look at. Well, that's by basic job definition. That's what the test needs to do, and you start off from there. Yeah, James.
The LXC are going to have the hacking session within LXC protocol. Hacking session can be useful for debugging or
yeah, hacking session. Well, this is interesting actually, because if we go back to there, one of the nice things about the LXC is that it is a test shell. You can have a test shell inside the LXC, as well as, if your device supports it, a test shell on the device. So depending on what you're actually deploying onto the device. And that allows you to have a hacking session inside that container. Whether you can have a hacking session on the device depends on whether you're deploying Android or Debian or something that actually supports it. But the LXC is a standard, Debian generally, is what most people end up using for the container, and you can have a hacking session in that container. That container is already set up. The only device you'll be able to see in the dev tree of that container is the device you're actually working with, so you know where things are and you can see where things are actually going on.
Yeah, well, to access the container, is there a way to access the container?
Well, if you specify a hacking session test definition for the container, you will have the dependencies installed into the container and the keys put in, and you'll be able to SSH into it.
So we run the normal hacking session
Yep.
definition. Okay, I got
We've already done that. We've been testing that for a while, that the normal hacking session works with an LXC.
it. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay,
Thanks.
so that hasn't changed. One of the big things with V2 is we've introduced a lot of new phrases, new terminology, new methods. So we've got LXCs and protocols, and what the Juno is using is a principle called secondary media. Now this is a way of replacing the functionality of a master image, and it's particularly common with things like the Juno. It's also something you can use with the Mustang. You can use it with the Cubitrack. Anything where you've got a system that you boot by TFTP or whatever, or Grub or whatever, Pixie, and you end up then in a RAM disk or an NFS. At that point, you've got a nice, sane system. You've got access to lots of different tools you can install, and that allows you to write your own image to secondary media. So a USB stick, SATA drive, all right? What the lab guys will scream at you for is if you touch any media that's actually involved in where the bootloader lives. But V2 gives you control. It doesn't actually protect you from Dave screaming at you because you've broken his device. He will still do that.
I rarely scream.
But V2 gives you the control, and it's up to you to manage that and be responsible, or the lab team will tell you off.
Yeah.
So secondary media is simply a way of doing it: deploy, boot, deploy a second image to secondary media, then you boot using that media. Now you're in that image. It's entirely up to you how you build that image, whether that image boots at all. And then you're in an environment where you decide exactly how that is run. And again, these protocols keep on working, so you can still add LXC as well as secondary media.
The advantage of this is that you are deploying and booting in the way that the device was intended to be used
Exactly.
in the first place,
Yeah.
rather than the old master image where we sort of fudged around it a
Yeah.
little bit.
And the other problem with the master image was that you were doing, or V1 was doing master images on devices that had no other media. They were doing it all on the SD card, and you were relying on partitions and labels. We made the decision in V2 that that was just unreliable, awkward, problematic.
It's a big maintenance nightmare.
Yeah. So that's why we said we're not going to give you explicit ways of writing to the SD card where U-boot lives. We're actually going to say to people, look, we'll give you information in the device configuration that says this device has got a USB stick. Inside your test shell, you will have access to helpers that tell you where that thing is, where it is in the device mapping, and and then you can use it from there. And you get that choice to actually do these kinds of things. So the lab team will declare that a Juno has a SanDisk cruiser blade stuck in, and it'll be a dev disk by ID will be declared by the lab team. You'll get to see, oh, that's that device over there,
So
and that's how
any
it
media
works.
you can deploy to, you will have access to.
Yeah.
The media you shouldn't deploy to, you will not have access to.
Exactly. All right. But because you've put it into an image entirely of your own accord and your own design, you can break the system, at which point you'll get into trouble.
If you work around it, yes, you can break it, but
Yeah.
it's
So don't do that.
no.
So yeah, that's how the Juno actually does these kinds of things. It is safer to do it on Juno than many other platforms because you've got a management interface that allows you to get in and reset things even if they actually really mess up the media. But you can also do secondary media on other devices. One other thing I will mention, V1 had the idea of VM groups. It was a rushed design. It worked, but it was rushed. We have sorted it out properly in V2, and it's called secondary connections. So a secondary connection, again, is not a formal device. It is just an extra test job in your multi-node definition, and at the moment it logs in over SSH, and basically say the Mustang, you boot the Mustang over NFS, you install OpenSSH server, and then we have a delayed start. The secondary connection starts when it's told that the SSH server is ready. It logs in. You've now got two terminals, two test shells on that one device in that one image. So you can do lots of different things there. You can watch the trace output of a debugger whilst you're actually watching the output on the console on another terminal. It's all up to you to set up. The virtualization team are using it for that kind of thing. They're running, they're starting QEMU in one test shell and then watching the QEMU monitor and maybe the GDB traces on a secondary connection. Okay, so that's the scary stuff. All right, that's the ideas of the plan. So do talk to us and get your test shells, your test definitions ported before Connect, and ask us for help whenever you need it. So who's got some questions?
You're saying we can use this staging for testing, right? But the devices like hacking have one device, and we started submitting job from Jenkins, like CTS test. So
yeah. So if staging doesn't have enough devices of the type that you want to work with, ask Dave what devices can be added. But that's, it's a case of if the device can be obtained, it can probably be added, can it?
Yeah, I've just advance notice I'm quitting IRC from now on.
Yeah.
So we're going to, I think what's going to happen, the way I'm looking at things, is that staging, while it will still be used for testing production, the next production release of Lava, will also become a bigger instance with more devices as a sort of clone of production, an advanced clone of production.
So part of that, of course, is that staging is probably going to be the first instance that anybody here notices where V1 gets turned off. for those reasons. The case of, well, we're going to make sure that we test that on staging before we do it on production.
The thing is, you did that query the other day, or yesterday,
Yeah.
on the database. Predominantly, the people submitting jobs are robots.
Yes.
They are not. It's not
For
just people
production.
submitting jobs for
Yeah.
production. So we are working closely with Fathi and Milosh to make sure that all of
And Mark Brown.
and Bruni, yeah, to make sure that all their jobs are transitioned to V2.
Yeah.
And when we spot, then when we spot individual V1 jobs being submitted, we will approach that person and have a kind word in their ear.
Yeah. If you're just resubmitting a V1 job that CI admin put in for you because there was some other problem, we'll notice. It'll be fine. We'll pick it up from the job description. We'll see what's going on. The other thing I will stress, actually I should have put this in the slides, V2 has the same kind of support for metadata as V1 in your job definition. It's different structure because it's YAML, not JSON. But it basically, you can still put key value pairs into metadata and use that resource. We are doing it now for our example jobs. So we'll put in metadata that says this example job came from that page of the documentation, or it came from this repository, or it's maintained by someone over here. So when you are testing jobs, when you're resubmitting jobs, think about adding or modifying the metadata at the point where you get, oh, resubmit, right, there's my job in the submit UI text box. Just tweak the metadata a bit. Then that helps you tell the difference between the jobs as you're iterating through your own testing. One thing I should, again, one more thing. V2, because V2 is YAML, V2 has a very powerful method called inline test definitions. Those will become really, really useful. Right?
It also
So
has another very powerful feature, which is being able to put comments in.
yes, absolutely. Every YAML file you think of using in V2 should have comments. Lots of comments. Why did you do this? Do it that way? Where did you get this file from? What are you doing with it? What do you want? Why did you have to change that bit?
What's the intent?
All right, because you can use comments, and they are preserved into what you see as the job definition. They're not preserved when it's actually executed. That's fine. Equally, use version control. Get these scripts into Git. Yes, your test definition scripts commonly live in Git, but your job submission scripts can live there as well. And let other people pick up why you changed something. Make your commit messages nice and descriptive and say, I'm changing this because I got that bit wrong, or I misunderstood this bit of the documentation.
And again, when we get to people struggling, if you're not understanding what you need to do to make your jobs work in V2, ask.
Yes.
There are a lot of people going to be around, especially, if you're in the early phases and you think you have an awkward job that you think, I'm not sure if this is going to work, please talk to us. We're actively looking for really good examples that we can put in the docs to help other people too.
Yeah.
One of the features that we've been pushing for the V2 docs is really good worked examples showing you exactly how to do the trivial jobs when you first start submitting, all the way up to really complicated things.
And if we write those examples, they're going to be from our focus, not from yours, and they're not going to be as helpful.
They're not real world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not real world.
But
And equally, when you come to talk to us, bear in mind what I said earlier, IRC is going to get flooded at times. So please use the mailing list, because the guys here will be watching the mailing list as frequently as they're watching IRC. You won't get necessarily any delay in getting your answer just because you're using email.
And then you've got an email trail.
And then we've got a public email trail that will help everybody else.
So I was going to just add that having gone through several examples, or several exercises now of transitioning from V1 to V2 jobs,
Yep.
once you get your head around V2,
Yes.
it's a lot easier, a lot
Yep.
better, and then when that moment when you can forget that JSON even existed is something to look forward to.
So it's not, it sounds scary, but V2 is not scary. It just gives you a lot of power.
It's incredibly powerful, and
Right.
it gives you enough power to
Yeah.
do bad things if you want to.
Exactly. But
Please
equally, V2 is our long-term development model. It's not as if it's going to be a V3 next year. No, it's not happening. This is the future. We're sticking with V2. It's got enough power for what we see as as the future needs of Lava users and admins.
I mean, V2 is lessons learned from V1,
Exactly.
and quite a lot of important lessons. You know, what we were doing over the past 6 years with V1 was going, oh, we haven't covered that case, so we shoehorn it into
Yeah.
an architecture that wasn't really designed for it.
Yeah.
And so V2 is just, okay, now let's do it properly because we've learned all the lessons. And the other thing I'll just say is the first person who writes a Lava virus and submits something which wipes out all the kit in the lab, that's it.
No. The prize will be someone's P45.
We will hunt you down.
A very simple question, since we're talking about transitions. So we now have the transition from V1 to V2, which is basically relying on Jessie as the OS.
Yep.
We'll be having Stretch coming
Yep.
out next, in probably near future.
Yep.
Don't know when, but is there something that we may foresee that may affect V2 on Stretch? Is there a plan for,
There's a- yeah.
testing and so forth?
So the developers typically are running either Stretch or SID, certainly in VMs for their own instances and have been for quite some considerable time. I've been running Unstable for 10 years. And then there's a case of, so we are ahead of the curve on that. We're making sure that Lava works both as server and dispatcher on Jessie with backports, because it does need backports now, and on Stretch as well. We have come across a couple of issues where you go from Debian stable to the new stable. I've already said we need to go via backports. That's not something that some users will expect, but equally, if you are keeping up to date with Lava at all, you will already have gone via backports to get to the point you're at. So it's not a problem then to go on from there. There are other steps we're considering, but those are they're just ideas at the moment. We haven't approached anybody in Debian or solid work on that area. But we are very aware of our reliance on Debian for this. And it's a two-edged sword, because we can use Debian to make this process smooth and clear and easily documented. That does then tend to tie us even closer into Debian and makes it harder for anybody to port us to Fedora or anything else. But that said, removing the V1 code will make porting to other distributions massively easier.
What about Python 3?
Python 3 is already in flow. Lava Dispatcher runs on a Python 3 already. Remy's done some massive work on that over the last year or so. We routinely test all our unit tests under Python 3. So LavaBot has been running Python 2 and Python 3 unit tests for about a year. So every review is tested with Python 2 and Python 3 for Lava Dispatcher. This harks back to the earlier slide. The reason we can't do Lava Server Python 3 is because the V1 code will simply not put up with Python 3.
Yeah.
So we have to drop the V1 code for lots of different reasons. That's one of them.
But, are all the libraries that we need ported?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Because that was a problem a year
yeah.
ago.
So that problem has been addressed. There's one more library, which it's the device dictionary support one. We may well move the device dictionary to the file system, but I've already got a version of that which I think works.
Okay.
Just as a comment for Python 3, I had a set of patches for V2 only dispatcher, and I'm running. I tried it to run on with Python 3 and it's working.
Yeah.
But V2 only. and the dispatcher, not the
Yeah.
server.
How are you guys planning to phase out V1 as far as removing the code and
You missed the earlier slide.
Yeah, you missed.
Yeah,
so
sorry,
if I go
I was
back
a
a few
little late.
slides. So, by having these key admin actions, it allows us to make the database transition migrations to drop V1 be very, very simple. We're not going to do any attempt at alter table. The V1 database migrations will just be drop table. It'll be a case of drop table dashboard underscore app dot star. And that, I promise you, in Postgres, drop table really is really quite fast.
and when is that happening?
So, there's various steps to do before that. We will turn off V1 submissions before we get to that point. We'll make sure teams have got the data before we turn off V1 submissions.
Right.
But yes, there will be a separate production release that will simply drop those tables.
Okay.
Are we going to back up the old data somewhere, some archive?
Yeah, Dave mentioned just before you came in, he's going to have a read-only archive VLO that's got the V1 data. So at the point where he is about to install the version that turns off V1 submissions, that'll be the point, that'll be the snapshot you get of V1. That will be read-only. Nothing could be changed in that then from then on. Yeah. Anything else?
In fact, just checking with Dave, and we'll plan to have that archive one running in parallel before that move happens.
That's not necessarily easy because you'll need to keep porting the data across
so
for running jobs.
We'll do a periodic migration
Yeah, okay.
of the data, just to make sure everything's so that it's there. We don't.
We can use that as a test of our backup strategy.
Well, we do. Oh, you can be cruel.
So we are not starting from job 1, right? So
No.
For example, like we have a V1 job which is there in production.
You'll just get a 404. If you go to the URL, you'll just get a 404.
Okay. Is there any redirections?
I can see where Sentinel's going with this one. So, if we get a 404, can we go and look in the archive for that job? It would be. Yeah.
Pick the job number work. It's not there anymore. Say any job number less.
As long as it's admin, yeah. As long as that redirect is admin specific or instance specific.
Oh yeah,
yes.
no, that's not implementation.
Exactly.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And make sure you tell the user that the URL has changed and it's actually not the one they're looking at.
You're being redirected.
Yeah.
I mean, I suspect once we've gone through a couple of months transition, nobody will be looking at old.
Well, this is it. This is
Well,
it.
except me for doing stupid animations of lava usage
Yeah.
over time. But
Yeah. And
we're running out of time.
yeah, we are.